All right, thank you, Tim. Everybody, welcome back from our little break. Um, we're going to move into the second portion of our community of practice event. We have several panel members who have agreed to share their stories, perspectives, reflections, knowledge as parents, professionals, advocates, or any combination thereof for persons with autism and the disability community around adult transition. Our panelists today are Tracy Stanislawski, Andrea Elsmo, Andrea Galing, and Hannah Johnson. They will each have about 15 minutes to share and present. And kind of like with James and Aaron, if we're ahead of schedule, I'll probably just open it up if people have some immediate questions or comments they want to ask the panelists. Otherwise, feel free to hold on to those questions and we'll come back to them at the end of the community practice event. I'd first like to start off by introducing Tracy as our first panelist. And Tracy, before you begin, can you share a little bit of background about who you are and your perspective and knowledge and insights that you bring to this topic of adults in transition, please? And then I'll let you go.
Absolutely, thank you. So my name is Tracy Stanislawski. I am a parent of four young adult children, and one with autism on the spectrum. And professionally, I work with, or have worked with children in early intervention with disabilities, and then currently now I work with youth who have mental health concerns in the Comprehensive Community Services Program, or CCS, in Milwaukee County. I have my background is in social work and education, and just kind of being a part of a lot of the different community of practice and community events of people that have disabilities, and also as an advocate for those groups. So that's a little bit about myself.
Thank you, Tracy, and go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about, and by no means am I an expert on transition or anything like that, but I'll share just a little bit of the things that I've learned so far. My son is right now 18, soon to be 19. We struggled along the way figuring things out, and we still don't have everything figured out, but there are some key things that I wanted to share that I have learned through him and just through others in my research. But collaboration, I think, is one of the important things. And we're nothing without each other. And so for me, learning helped with engaging in Facebook groups and community organizations and asking questions, and other professionals discover the resources that we used for my son and with him. I didn't always, and I didn't know this at the beginning, but always I don't want to say trust because that's not the right word, but I always didn't want to put all my eggs in one basket, let's say with the school, because I feel like there at that time, and kind of just in our dealings, there was not always all the information that I needed. I'm always a kind of a person who looks for different ways around things if we need to, or different solutions to problems, because I know that there's not always one solution to a problem. And so I wanted to make sure that we had options for my son. I also wanted to look also to individualized needs. Not everybody with autism is the same. They all have different needs and they have different strengths. And in my job and in my home, we try to focus on those strengths. Is everything perfect? Absolutely not. But I wanted to say that we do want to look at those needs, because as James and as even Aaron was talking about, building on those strengths in high school and while these kids are young, and looking at their interests and really kind of, I want to say, pushing them toward that, but really going with those interests. Can we really expound upon that? It leads to future opportunities, whether they're going to be employed or even just working volunteer or just doing other things in the community. Working on those strengths will really help that build confidence. Something else I learned that is students with IEPs, they can participate with their peers in extracurricular activities. Schools can write those goals into IEPs and get that support that they need to participate with peers. So they don't always have to, just work at the, as a concession worker. They could actually participate on a team if that's something that they could, they could do. There are some caveats that they have to have the ability to do that as well. But, find those opportunities and be creative. Don't always just kind of pigeonhole kids into one or the other. If they want to do that, that's fantastic. If they like, working with people or they like to sell things, I mean, that is a great way to learn those skills. And communication, like encourage that communication with your child and with your teams. For It took me a while to figure out that, my son does have a say in how things happen, and not that I didn't take it or want him to be independent, but when you're just used to doing things for kids because they couldn't, and then all of a sudden now they're able to, I want to make sure that he has that ability to say, I don't want to do this or I want to do that, but also knowing that some things, especially for him, are hard and tough, and where he'd rather just spend the day, in his bedroom. I want him to get outside or do things. So trying to like be creative about that, like, hey, let's go build a fire in the backyard, and that'd be something he might want to get outside, or let's go shoe shopping or whatever, whatever it is that he likes to do, or could get him outside and get him out into the world. And then asking him why it's hard, using, those things about him, and helping him explore, like, well, what would happen if you did that? Or how would you try that? And kind of really um, pushing things that, he may not do. And I do definitely acknowledge that he does need that time away, like all of us do. So, trying to balance that. The other thing I think that we could have done a little bit better is planning more for the future and starting that early. Even though at 14, in your IEP, they start talking about transition, I think it should even maybe start earlier than that. I'll share a couple websites, and we probably may even have them at the end, but websites that working with my son that really helped me like really explore what it looks like at different ages, to plan for the future, and what skills that you could build on to make him make him a better person, and to really help him plan for what his future is going to look like. I think another thing that I learned that was very confusing and maybe too late is that area of guardianship. Like, what will that look like, or what might that look like, or what could that look like? For him, we knew that a full guardianship was probably too much. He doesn't need all of that, but he does need support in areas like medical. And how do we find that medical home for him, which is something that we're still trying to look for. I was kind of dismayed at Children's Hospital when we asked our pediatrician, like, this was like at 17, like, what do we do now for adults? And she said, well, I don't know, we really don't make a recommendation. So of course, then it's back to the community, who are others using. But using those shared guardianship and learning about those opportunities and having them help learn. He tends to push that stuff off. And so, little by little, I like to bring it up and like, let's learn about this, and let's try this. What do you think might work for you? Or maybe none of it will. And that's okay. But I like the idea for him for shared guardianship, because he can say, I don't need your help right now. And I'm good with that. I want to set him up for the future, like our other kids are, where they're ready to grow and learn and be on their own and independent. I think another thing is high expectations and encouragement. And when I think about goal setting, it's not like we sat down and said, this is what our expectations are, but he was really at one point like, I don't want to go to college. And I didn't know if he was ready for college or not, to be honest. I don't know if he would ever survive at college, to be honest with you, but we went anyways. And he had older sisters who were able to go, so he spent some time with them. But we did tour colleges with him, and we talked to the people who were in charge of the disability and accommodations to see what things they could offer. In the end, he was able to try to go to college. He tried it for a semester and wasn't able to maintain that, but that's okay, because he learned a lot of other skills. We weren't angry with him that he, couldn't figure out his classes, but he went. And so, if you look at that from a longer perspective, was he able to do that in high school? Not necessarily, even, in middle school, but the fact that he was able to even go to classes and go on his own and, kind of live on his own in a dorm without much supervision and check-in was huge for him. And I think that actually helped with a lot of growth for him too, for his future. I do think that too, when you're looking at expectations, this starts at school as well. And when they were, I'm sorry, that the light just flicked off. But when they look at school and we talked about the IEP and what transition would look like for him, and maybe realistically, this was what was going to be for him, but I didn't want him to be pigeonholed into one way or the other. I wanted to have opportunities for him, but school was really saying, well, probably can't really do college. Maybe he could do WCTC. Maybe we should look at working, just at Walmart, and not that that's a bad job for sure, but I think that we wanted to have expectations and let him try things. And if he failed, that's okay, but at least he tried it. And maybe he knows, and maybe he's not ready now, but he's ready later. Maybe he never is. But the idea is that to kind of open his mind to see things that are happening around him and learn about different things. And what kid at 18, 17, 16 knows what they want to do in life anyways, right? So we always made sure that we fostered his love of things. Again, navigating challenges. We talked about the challenge being at college and him being away from us for a semester, and how he called a lot at home, and we went up there a lot to visit him, and just sometimes just that moral support, even though it was like, hey, mom and dad, I'm glad you're here. Take me to lunch, and okay, I see you later. He needed that, just that support, check in, and then he was done. He needed that time away. College was very taxing on him, but he did it, and I think he's been a little bit more independent since then. He actually kept his little refrigerator in his room now, so now he's got his own little system in there. So I think that was kind of neat. We sent him out shopping to do things and add things to his refrigerator for times when we're not cooking. Also support systems, like who could support him when we're not here. Would his siblings be able to do that? We went on a trip with my daughter who lives in DC, and for a long time she didn't understand what his challenges were, and so he got to spend some time with her, and I'm like, well, this is the challenge that he's facing. And these are the things that, like, although to you seem like he's being disrespectful, he's trying to engage and he doesn't know how. And so I think she was able to see that from a different perspective, and things changed a lot between the two of them. And I don't know that they will be able to be a caretaker for him, or if he will even need one, as he's older. But starting to build those communities early on, and knowing who you can count on and trust with your child, I think is important. Also, medical care. I think, again, I talked a little bit about that in the adult world, but I feel like that's a real big gap for children transitioning to adulthood. I don't know who's going to give him a freezy spray if he needs it for a shot, or things like that. And so he doesn't understand a lot of the things that he's expected to do. And so I think having somebody be able to go with him and help him through that might not be us, or that a doctor understands the needs of a person with autism, is a lot different than just a typical child who's turning 18 who could just go to the health clinic and advocate for themselves. One thing that I think helped Jacob a lot, and school did help us with this a little bit, and I knew about it prior to, but was with DVR. And there were times where he didn't really want to meet with DVR, and but now he's doing it regularly. They're really helping him with his job right now. He's working part-time, and he's got plans to try WCTC in the fall. And so he'll live at home with us. And I think that kind of support will be very helpful for him. I do think that he's able to make those decisions without me being there, at our DVR meetings. If he wants me there, I'll come, of course, but he's been managing that pretty much on his own. So they do check in with me here and there, which is fine. But I just kind of make sure, and sometimes from the background, that he's following through with some of those things. But honestly, he's been very independent with that now. And I think a lot of that has to do with that independence that he had a little bit ago. And it's hard. I'll be honest with you. It's hard as a parent to be able to navigate this transition between, like, all the stuff that I did and now all the stuff that he needs to do. And did I teach him enough? And what doesn't he know? And what does he know? And who can he ask if he doesn't ask me? So I think we're still working through that. I think, like any parent does, and with all of those transitions. But I really do try to be open and ask him what he wants when he's ready to talk about that. I did some research on autism and parent engagement in schools, and there just was really some interesting things that I found, that there are gaps in communication. Obviously, we know with school refusal for kids in school, and so I think it's even more important to make sure that you're an advocate for your student and your child if you can be. You know your child best, and don't let people talk you into things that you know for a fact that happens at home. It's most likely happening at school too, just in different ways. Um, the statistics, like up to half of students diagnosed with autism don't go to college or gain employment after high school, which is a staggering fact. And I think that, again, making sure that their transition plans, or at least their plan at home, is focusing on what their strengths are and building those strengths and building those sense of confidence and things that they can do. I know that Jacob did struggle a lot with not having confidence, and really it stemmed a lot from not being understood at school. And then being in and not what that was bad, because honestly, I think it saved him in high school, but he went to an alternative high school placed by the school, and it was a small school, and it was online and working at your own pace. But in the real world, that doesn't always work. So, having to alter being, coming in and deciding, well, today I really don't want to work, but tomorrow I will, is hard to navigate when you're in the real world and you have to really go to work every day, or you have to, go to class every day. So again, some of those skills are things that you learn as you get older. But also I think there's things that when you have those expectations that are high, you may not be meeting them. And not that it's bad, it's just they're not ready yet. So what can they meet that's maybe closer to that? Also, employment rates are low for, among all disabilities, but students with autism, they're the lowest. And so when schools and parents really work together, it's so important that those goals are aligned. We want to make sure that we give our best opportunities for our students with autism, because they are in a little bit of a different category. And I don't want to say like in a bad way, but they are different than students with other disabilities, because they're so unique in the way that they may think, or the way that they that they want to communicate with you. And again, you can increase that student's odds of attending a post-secondary institution if that's what the student wants to do, when both parents are communicating, because you're getting all of those values and all of those goals aligned to move on to that next level of education, should that's what the student wants. And again, doesn't matter if they go to college, if they're going to volunteer, if they're going to, just be in the community at a day program. All those skills would transfer over to no matter what that student does and what that child does. And so I think for us, it's very important for us to explore the things that he might be good at, so that he can, feel empowered. And to learn to advocate for himself when we're not there, because we're not going to be there forever. And, his siblings may not be there forever for him either. And so I want to make sure that, he's set up to be able to talk for himself and to pursue these goals. And that community and what the role is our community has for him. Like, what is he involved in the community? Who are those people that he can go to if he doesn't want to talk to us? That's really important for us. And I have to say that between James and Aaron, their presentations were both so inspiring for me as a parent, to be able to see that, how well they're doing. And, and again, not that I don't have hope, but we have hope that this will happen for my child too. So I just wanted to say, kind of wrap it up, that, take their strengths, do the best you can as a parent, and just kind of start early thinking about it, at least, what this transition may look like, or, what their needs may be. And those needs change over time. So just keep, tabs on that, and keep encouraging and keep moving forward. So thank you for this opportunity.
You're welcome, Tracy, and thank you for sharing. That's a lot, and I'm unpacking. I want to just open it up if people have questions. I think the format kind of worked well. And so if there's a couple of immediate questions or thoughts somebody would like to chime in on, please do so. I've got a couple of that I'd like to just ask Tracy as well, but I'll just give it a moment because I do a lot of talking and see if somebody else would like to have a question for Tracy or a comment.
I think one thing that is often forgotten that is often the Achilles heel for employment in autism is that the ADA does not protect employment universally. There is a clause that states that if you cannot perform the duties of the job that you've been hired to do, the ADA does not protect you. And a lot of times the biggest Achilles heel for employment in autism is that all jobs have direct and indirect duties and requirements, and many autistic people are being fired from jobs not necessarily because of discrimination, but because they are genuinely unable to perform the duties and responsibilities, whether indirect and indirect, of the jobs that they are trying to pursue.
Thank you, James. Very important consideration and something I think we all learn through employment as well, especially when we live in a state like Wisconsin that's an at-will employer and can kind of fire you at anything. I will pass it to Nancy. Nancy, please come off mute and share your question or comment.
Thank you. Again, I'm really, really appreciative of everybody doing these presentations today. There's one thing that I did realize. My son is a college graduate, but I also know a lot of adults on the autism spectrum, and there seems to be a gap in understanding because of the sequence of going to grade school, middle school, high school, even college, is where you are paying somebody to teach you something. That is, and then a lot of people think that, well, the next progression is a job, so that it should happen just like all the progressions from school. That's not true, because the progression from high school to a job or college to a job is from you paying somebody to teach you things and somebody else paying you in the job to solve their problems. This is a really major shift in what is happening. So that's something I think needs to be emphasized, because I've even talked to adults who did not realize that and couldn't understand why they were not successful in a job, because they were supposed to have a job just like they were supposed to go to school.
Aaron, please go ahead. Sorry, Aaron, you're on mute.
So yeah, riffing off of Nancy's thought, I'd like, well, why not? We all learned to talk when we were two, just like that, without having to make any effort. So why is this any different? The second thing I'd like to get at is that I also second the college thing. I got into college by complete accident. I was applying to the program in Whitewater at the time, Project Assist, and I didn't do any of the college applications that typically developing kids are doing. That didn't do any of that. It's like it was a miracle I got into college. So it's not a blaming thing. It takes off some of the shame knowing that it's not an easy system to navigate. So
Thank you, Aaron. I just want to emphasize or comment on a couple of things that Tracy said that stuck out to me. One thing, Tracy, I felt like your presentation and your experience as a parent was this acknowledgement or reflection of how to be in the moment when something is happening, sort of that teachable moment. Is this a teachable moment? But then having to balance that with how intentional do you want to be at this moment? And I think that's just something all parents sort of struggle with, like, oh, is this a good moment? Like natural consequence? Is this a bad time? Because it's just not, there's a time and a place for everything to bring something up. And I really felt like a lot of your examples really highlighted that trick for parents with autistic children or children with disabilities is, where do you find that intentionality and when do you find those moments to have teachable without kind of wrecking the moment? and adding more stress or adding some other thing that's going to come on. So I really appreciated that. The other thing that I really appreciated was your comment about starting early. And that is not meant to say like as a judgment or anything, because I think we all have 20/20 hindsight, like, gosh, I wish I would have started that earlier. And I think like that is just sort of a message, just trying to get out and remind people it's so hard to be in the here and now, but also to kind of look forward a little bit too, to try to keep that. So thank you for saying that. And then the last thing, and I'll hand it to Tim, who's been patiently waiting, is your comments about guardianship and supportive decision-making. I can remember when I first entered this field, nobody really knew what that meant. And the state, quite frankly, did a crappy job of talking about guardianship and what it meant. And I really, and then I was blown away. I think it was like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, that Ohio became one of the first states in the nation to require guardians to go through some type of training to understand what exactly it is they've signed up for. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's, 20,000 or 2005, and now this is happening. So I just want to kind of comment that I think some of the things that you brought up, and kind of like with Aaron, is that maybe over time, some of these systems will become better tools for people. But community inclusion, all of these things that have erupted in the last couple of decades, I think there's just some structures and some bureaucracies that have been way behind. And so hopefully things like the guardianship law or supportive decision-making, ABLE accounts, some of these things that are just sort of coming on will also be helpful for adults in transition. And now I'll turn it over to Tim. Thank you.
Tracy, just wanted to see if you were able to see the question in chat and if you could respond to that.
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to make sure I got through the comments, but yes. So what could school have done differently for us? I think just not assuming that he wouldn't need some other supports after high school. So we didn't know about, we worked with DVR, but we didn't necessarily know about guardianship or, shared guardianship. We didn't know about this transition app that I put in the chat. It's from the Wisconsin, I forget the acronym. I think Tim, you would know. But there's an app on there that my son actually filled out. It was really easy. He was able to do it, and it actually turned it into the school and said, this is what I want in my transition. So had we kind of known that earlier, we would have been able to work on that with him earlier, that these are what my goals are. This is, do I want to go to college? Do I want to do this? This is what my interests are. And so laid it out very nicely for him. And they actually added it right in his transition plan. And that's what we kind of worked off of for that last year. But I just feel like we were not prepared for all of these other challenges that we might have as the parent of, or as an autistic individual, because they assumed that he was just going to graduate and that's what they were worried about. Let's get him out and be done. I could have used more, supports and more, I guess not services, but resources. But I think that's the important thing about, like parent engagement and getting parents involved is where are they at and what do they want? If the school would have asked me, I would have said, this is what I need, but I really didn't know that I needed it until I started thinking about it. And again, it was kind of, I think, looking back too late at that point. I think really working with your parents and really knowing your parents and your kids and what they're good at, what they want, and not just sitting at an IEP meeting and saying, okay, we're checking the boxes. Yep. How many credits? Oh, he needs a half a credit. Great. We'll just do that by an online class or whatever it was, so that was really the crux of our conversations.
Thank you, Tracy. Is there one last comment or question for Tracy, and then we'll move on? Okay. I would like to introduce our second panelist, Andrea Elsmo. Andrea and I'll disclaim, our co-workers, colleagues at Dane County Human Services. Andrea, just like Tracy, before you start in your presentation, would you give a little bit of background on your perspective, insights, and knowledge around transition and working with autistic individuals in the disability community, please? And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So, like Eric said, my name's Andrea Elsmo. I work with him at Dane County Human Services. Some of my background, I guess, in transition has been, I actually started out working in the schools here in Madison, Wisconsin. And I actually began in the elementary school, which is interesting because I always wanted to do transition. But I had to get my foot in the door somehow. So there was a position open and I took it, and I was able to work my way up age-wise into transition after a couple of years. But one thing that was always important to me, even with the younger kids, was just making sure people talked about the future. I remember I was in one of my first grade kiddos' IEPs, and I was like, well, what do you want to do when you get older? And the parents were kind of like, what? Why are you asking that? But I explained to them I came from a transition background, and that's what kind of my bread and butter was when I was studying in school. And so they went with it, and I said, well, now it will just always be in your IEP, and then you can update it every year. So hopefully when you get to the point when you're 18, it changes from wanting to be, I forget what it is, something to do with animals at the zoo. And eventually, yeah, they could see that kind of morph into whatever else they wanted to do. And maybe it stayed the same, but anyway, so yeah, my background has been in the school system. After that, I worked in the Madison area high schools as their employment specialist. And so employment and work has always been kind of my number one priority and goal for individuals with disabilities. My philosophy is that everyone can work in the community if they have the right supports in place. And so I've just kind of found jobs that along the way that I've been able to practice that. So I was an employment specialist in the school district. I worked with students when they were exiting the 18 to 21 program. So in Madison, most of our individuals with intellectual disability, autism, most of them went on to the 18 to 21 program. Not necessarily that that's not the way you have to go. But I think Madison has it set up in a way that it's a program that is more based out in the community. And so they're not just going to the school or one room altogether. It's actually a very individualized approach to what they want their day, their life to look like after high school when they exit at 21. So my role there was to work with students when they were 20, 21 and getting ready to leave the school system and making sure that they had resources in place for after high school. So I think every year in Dane County, well, at least in the Madison schools, we had at least 30 to 40 grads each year that are exiting and getting ready to go. So with that said, along the way, I met someone at Dane County, and he ran a program called Vocational Futures Planning and Support. And a lot of our students utilize this service in Madison, but it's a county service. So people from all over can use it in our county. And so I stepped into that role because I realized how much I love helping people determine what their plan is after high school and help be a part of the big team and make sure they have things in place so they feel successful and feel like they're on at least some path, and knowing that path can change, but some path after high school. So that's kind of my background. Now I'm currently doing the role at Dane County where I work with our vocational future planning and support, or I'm just going to call it VFPS for short now, for that program. And it's actually a program that we contract out to a company in Dane County called Employment Resources, Inc. So I work closely with this company to deliver the service. and identify individuals across our county that could benefit from it after talking with teachers and other teams. In addition to that, I also do a lot of our kind of earlier experience for younger students that are like 14 to, I always say 17.99. So they're kids that are in on our children's waiver, and I make sure that we continue to develop programming for them when they're younger to get the experience, be able to have a chance to learn different soft skills, go on different job shadows, see other adults in our community that have disabilities out there working, so they can see what that is like and that it's a possibility for them. So I do a little bit of that with the younger kids, but then I also focus on our older students that are getting ready to enter, I call it the adult world. I've never figured out a better name for it, but they're getting ready to exit the school system. So what is VFPS? Like I said, it's a program that works with students in their final year of school. Typically, that is students that are 20 or 21 here in Madison or Dane County area. A lot of our students, it's very common for them to go on to the 18 to 21 program just because they feel like they still need that extra support and guidance. Tracy kind of explained that a little bit too, just like they aren't quite ready at 18. And so being able to talk with your teachers in schools about what that programming can look like is definitely an important piece and something I'd recommend for any parents out there listening to this. So, but we, in Dane County, we primarily help search for employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities, but we also look at the whole picture. And I say we focus on the employment piece. I'll probably say that multiple times here, but we have found in Dane County that our rate for individuals with disabilities that are hired at competitive integrated employment jobs out in the community is pretty high compared to the rest of the state. And one reason for that is years ago, I wasn't even working at the county at the time, but back in like 2017, 2018, everything shifted over. So the county had run kind of like our adult support system. And we were the last county from what I've been told, the last county to kind of turn that over to the long-term care, managed care organizations or IRIS consultant agencies. And so we realized that since we weren't having an eye on this at a local county level, that made us nervous that our employment rates were going to go down for individuals because we weren't, we had so many other people working with them now, and it wasn't like a county driven thing. We also had a goal or kind of a requirement, I guess is the best way to put it, that folks had to have some type of competitive integrated employment in order to get the adult funding services back when it was at the county. And so when things shifted from county driven stuff to family care and IRIS driving it, we realized that having a program like VFPS would probably help maintain some of the employment outcomes that we were seeing that we had here in Dane County. So that was a little bit of the history behind it. But since then, you know, what we've found most helpful is we work with about 20-ish students each year. And like I said, in Dane County, I think about 60 to 70 students exit each year that qualify for long-term support. So it's a small chunk. But we work with about 20 students each year, and the students we work with are those that might have some extra barriers to obtaining employment, maintaining it, navigating the long-term care system, navigating how to work with DVR schools, So those are kind of the cases that get sent our way. And everything was pretty much recommended by the relationships I have with teachers, special ed directors, DVR counselors. We're a very collaborative county, I would say, that make sure we're all aware and know the best, or suggest the best route for folks to go based on their goals after high school. So employment is kind of our number one goal. We do asset and barrier identification. We help people with career exploration, and then a guided job search. So many of our folks we work with, which I'll talk a little bit about a few of them, really need some of that customized employment in order to be successful. So this is a picture of just some of our employees in Dane County at different job sites, but I'm going to talk about a few of our current transition students, just because they're living through transition right now. It's May 1st, so we are counting down. They only have about a month and 11 days left of school. So anyways, just a few stories I thought I'd share about some students we work with, just so you can kind of hear about the process we take with them. So the first student, and I'm just going to use initials, her name is MC. She is an individual that has very complex medical needs and 24-hour medical care and supervision. So she was an individual that we knew we needed to make sure we really carved out a position for her. So rather than looking at a job posting and figuring out, all the things this business needed, we looked at it and picked out just one or two things that MC was able to do and contribute to the business, and kind of propose that setup to the employer to see if it's something that could be helpful and a benefit to their business. She also needs a switch to complete her tasks. And so we worked really collaboratively with the OT at her school team, and then DVR, who was able to fund the switch because she did end up getting this job. And so I bring up her as an example because I think from the surface of things, many folks would think that it would be very challenging for her to have some type of meaningful employment. And what we did is we looked at what she can do, which is she's great at giving you a great smile, but also being able to press a switch and work collaboratively with a job coach to get work done. And her schedule right now, she only works about 2 hours a week, but it's 2 hours that, ends up being more like 4 to 5 hours out of the house with transportation and being in the community. So she's getting ready to exit in June. And another thing we do with the VFPS program is make sure there's an agency in place on the other side. And they are currently fully trained in on her care needs, and have had her visit their community day program, as well as have them come into the job to help her with tasks. So another student that came to mind when you guys were talking was a student with the initials of LO, and he actually is an individual that not only is transitioning this year, but he also moved out of his parents' home into a community living arrangement. And so he had a few transitions going on this year. He still does. And he's also an individual that is pursuing post-secondary education. So, I like to share his story as well, because there is a wide range of folks we work with, but he still seemed like a great candidate for this type of extra support that we could provide, because there was so much going on in his life with him moving out of his parents' home, him getting used to a supportive home care agency. He wants a job. He actually currently has 2 other part-time jobs that are a couple hours a week, but he wanted to add to that. And he has a very specialized skill set that he wants to go to school for. So there's a whole lot of moving parts with this individual, and we're still not, I know it's May 1st, but we're still not quite to the end of what this looks like for him. However, we just make sure, being involved as a large team and making sure everyone's collaborating together to help him get to the point that he wants to be at, or at least as close to it as possible by June 11th, is really our goal as a VFPS team, and also as just like an interdisciplinary team that he has with schools and DVR. So those are two short stories. I'm going to kind of move on a little bit and wrap things up, because I know I probably already talked for about 10 minutes. But anyways, I think, my biggest thing is the successes from these stories with MC and hopefully LO and many other people like the ones you see on the screen. They have all had very successful transition stories. A lot of that is really just attributed to our collaborative approach in Dane County and how we work together professionally. I think, I think it was Tracy that said, just like parents, we're nothing without each other. And so parents need parents to rely on, and professionals need professionals to rely on. And I think we really, we have to make sure that the students' needs, the students' goals are really what's front and center at what we're doing and how we're collaborating together. VFPS is a program that there's nothing special about it. I feel like anyone could do this. You don't have to call it VFPS. But I think the most helpful thing is that there's kind of a neutral person that can pull everyone together to make sure that we're working towards whatever goal it is the team has for, or whatever goal the student has for themselves post high school. One way we, have such a collaborative approach that I just want to touch base on a little bit here is we participate very frequently in our local CCOT, and that's something that every county has. If you don't know who your CCOT liaison is, feel free to email me. I'm happy to pull that up for you. Some CCOTs are more established than others, but I will say that's a place where professionals like DVR staff, our school staff is involved, care managers from family care organizations, IRIS consultants are involved. We hope to have a family and youth involved at the county level. And then, independent living centers or other resources that are available in our community. They have representatives that get sent to this group so we can collaborate on how we can all work together, because we're coming from all different perspectives, all different rules we have to follow. And so the more we talk about it and the more we can, bring up issues in a professional platform, I think the better off we are serving our families. So that's certainly something that I think has helped Dane County just give a platform for such a collaborative approach to have these successful transitions and employment outcomes. The last thing I wanted to share is this is something our CCOT group worked together on. Sorry, you cannot see any of the print on it because there's so many, but these are all of our employers in Dane County that employ someone with an intellectual developmental disability. They're folks that require some form of job coaching or case management. And it's over 850 employers, which is just growing. We added probably about 20 more employers this year. So it's constantly needing to be updated, but it's just kind of a cool map to look at, and something that all the professionals that are part of the CCOT really are proud of, and we can kind of come back to that our work together as professionals and our collaboration is leading to these good outcomes. And this right here, this map of great businesses we're working with. So yeah, I'll leave you with that. If you are in the Dane County area, send me a message, because I'd love to actually share the poster with you, because these are all businesses you should also support, because they are working hard to include individuals with disabilities in their workforce. So
Thank you,
thank you.
Andrea. Could you let people know what CCOT stands for, and just give a little bit of history if there are people on the line that are just hearing CCOT for the first time?
Yeah, CCOT stands for the County Community on Transition. Every county has a CCOT, or some smaller counties might have a shared CCOT. But typically it's comprised of what I was saying, a DVR representative, our supported employment agency representatives. There sometimes is a family or youth involved with lived experience. So really a great group that all should look into and potentially be involved with if transition is your bread and butter like mine.
Thank you for sharing that. I think, and I know Nancy has a question. There's a couple of things in the chat for you too, Andrea, to look at. I just sort of want to come back to sort of the history of Dane County and our transition policy, because it is unique. And I know from being in this field a long time that Dane County offers things that a lot of places around the state don't. When Dane County transitioned into family care, our transition policy did come at risk. And that was a policy that we sort of put out there with our long wait list, to tell families like, hey, if your child is able to graduate high school with paid employment, we will work with you to get waiver supports for that, those services. And so we put this transition policy in place to really encourage work for all the benefits that work can provide to people. I think what we learned as a county, and maybe what the state learned when Dane County moved into family care, if I can be so audacious as to promote us a little bit, is that the work that Andrea did and her predecessor, even though it was a bureaucratic role, it helped bring all these different parties together. Because as we're learning and as we're hearing, there's a lot going on in our daily lives and on top of transition. And so when you think about employment, there's a lot of balls in the air that need to kind of be monitored, herding cats, whatever phrase you'd like to use. And we really felt like that role at the county really helped bring the school together, bring families together, bring prospective employers together. And so I think the CCOT is looking to sort of replace what Dane County had done for about 20 years with our transition policy, is to say, yeah, anybody can apply for a job, anybody can leave school, but it takes a village at times to help people coordinate these services and collaborate together. And without that village mentality and somebody to kind of help that, it becomes difficult at times. So I'll get off my soapbox and a little history perspective. Andrea, I have one question for you, and then I'll let you get to the questions in the chat, and if other people have questions for you real quick. But could you briefly just talk about that experience of making a cold call to an employer? Because I think that's something that, kind of like James and Aaron and the stories we're hearing, is how you just kind of get started. And like we all kind of had to get job applications. Like, what's it like to call an employer and try to explain what it is that you're selling to them, in terms of you work with a person with a disability, they have skills, they have gifts that they can bring to a job, but you might have to carve out, some aspect of it. And that's a big, scary thing to just kind of make that cold call. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of that experience, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I would say we don't do a ton of cold calls. I think one, because Madison is big, but it's a small community. So there's a lot of success we've had is knowing someone that knows someone. And so just tapping into your network of resources, like if you know someone, like a parent that, is working at a job a place of employment that might have a potential task that you have an individual set up or has strengths to do, then, I think usually our approach is to reach out to that person that has the connection and get kind of a good lead or a good contact for that place, because it is more of a conversation than a typical walk in and grab an application, right? So usually that's our approach. I mean, there are certainly times where we've had students that are like, I want to work at Thermistore because I'm passionate about this. And so we'll be like, okay, tell me why, what do you think you can do? And then we'll take that and advocate for the student, typically in person if we can, and try to get that good contact of someone that could talk through this as a potential. So yeah, a little bit of cold calling, but mostly it's knowing someone that knows someone and just reaching out to networks and places that, places of employment that have a good setup for someone with unique needs or unique skills, and being able to share that to other employers to replicate is also really helpful. All of the places we go into, we make sure that we have a resume, a visual resume, so we create those and really showcase, I guess, the individual and what their skill set is and how they could fit well into that place of employment. So
Thank you. So cold call with intentionality.
yeah.
Always. Nancy had a question in the chat for you, Andrea. She wanted to know if you have any experience with youth options, and if you do, if you can comment on what it is and who can use it.
Youth options. So the youth options we have, that's kind of what I was talking about at the beginning, was our CLTS program. We've been able to get a handful of providers that are actually in the adult world primarily, but I've been able to come up with a group of them that are interested in working with youth that are, like 14 is kind of our beginning point, just because that's when the IAP stuff starts rolling. But and they have created programs that our youth can participate over the summertime, since summer is, you got a few months of a break from school, so why not add in like employment boot camp? So those are the options for youth we have for employment training here locally, along with, generic like DVR stuff that they do. I know they have different courses and such, but sometimes folks aren't quite ready to have DVR or be enrolled with them, or there's a wait list if they are younger, like 13, 14. And so putting these programs together, through our adult agencies has been, I think, really a big hit for the youth around here. But I don't think every area has that quite yet. So hopefully I answered your question, Nancy. Let me know if you want me to expand on anything.
I think one, if I'm following a little bit too, youth options sounds like a service that's still available, but however, with sort of the advent of the CLTS program and family care across the state, youth options now becomes more of a county-driven program to try to find providers who would want to provide that service under CLTS. I got that right? So probably, Nancy, the biggest thing that's happened in 25 years is probably the more bureaucratization, I can't even say it, making our programs more bureaucratic. And so what maybe was a little bit easier to facilitate with youth options under the previous waiver programs becomes, I wouldn't say has limitations or barriers, but the CLTS program comes with its own set of rules and procedures, and adult providers have to sort of acquiesce to this children's waiver. And so sometimes it can be hard to find adult providers who want to kind of dip their toes in this program, even though they can get reimbursed for it. I'll say real quickly, I see you coming on, Nancy, is that ERI, or Employment Resources, Inc. They would be an agency that are kind of doing some of that more statewide. So they do have a presence in Dane County, but ERI also has a flagship office in Brown County. And in talking with them the last 2 years, they're looking to take some of the stuff that they've done in Dane County around youth options and helping you think about employment and trying to do that statewide. And they're also looking at different types of funding mechanisms like CLTS. So I just kind of put that out there. If you're curious about some of this, Employment Resources, Inc. would be a really good website to check out.
Actually, this did not answer my question as I remember it, because the youth options my family participated in was strictly for education. That
Okay.
when he was in high school, he was able to take university classes that the high school paid for before he graduated at the age of 21. And does that still exist or not?
Yep, that does still exist. Sorry, Nancy. Yes, we, I mean, it probably just depends on location, but we certainly have that here in Dane County. It's the program we have is called Campus Connect, but they're able to still be in the high school system, have a high school case manager, but then get to take college level classes. So
In Racine County, we call it, or at least at my school, it's called Start College Now. And students are able to take college classes while they're here at the high school.
The way we used it is my son has unusually high math skills. And by the time he graduated from high school, he had 18 credits of advanced math from the UW-Madison. So that's the kind of money saving and time saving thing that can happen if you have someone with exceptional skills in some area.
I myself, although I was deemed academically unable to attend college full-time, took community college classes in high school as requested by my IT team, just so I could determine if college was for me. And then I did that, realized college wasn't for me, and then accepted that. But that dual enrollment was really helpful in helping me familiarize myself with the college experience.
Thank you, James. Aaron, go ahead. You've been waiting.
Okay, so I'm coming in from Medicaid advocacy and currently in the adult world. Although I understand that children's long-term care and things like birth to 3 are also on Medicaid. So currently, what's happening right now is that proposed Medicaid cuts would prioritize things that are called mandatory programs, the things they have to do, and they would cut what they call optional. The optional stuff is what is a lot of the services we have that are self-determined and less restrictive. So keep up to date on Medicaid. So stay tuned.
Thank you for that plug, Aaron. And I will just say, in going off of what Aaron, and then I'll transition over to Andrea Galing, who's patiently waiting, is Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities. It's a statewide organization. They have been hosting Friday morning check-ins about all that's happening at the federal level. I can't remember if Tammy has one for tomorrow yet, but if you look at their website, Wisconsin BPDD, Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities, they do have a government advocacy person, Tamara Jackson, and Tammy's been hosting really wonderful kind of just, this is what's happening kind of thing. So thanks for that plug, Aaron, because that's very important. And I will, as we look at time here, wow, it's going to be like a full time. We're going to transition to Andrea Galing. Andrea, just like the previous panelists, before you kind of start with your presentation, can you give people a little bit of history yourself and the insights and knowledge you bring to this area of adult transition, please?
Sure. I, unlike the other presenters, don't have any cool slides, so you'll just get to see my name and who I work for. But I have worked across the lifespan. So I've worked at an adult day center decades ago with people with dementia. I worked in the old Dane County system, also worked as a support broker within IRIS, was a CLTS case manager, and I now work as a behavior consultant. I think the things that I have enjoyed about being the support broker in the current position I have is I've gotten to work outside Dane County as well as inside Dane County. And that allows me to sometimes think about what one has that the other doesn't and vice versa. So I think we've talked a lot about services and things like that, but I think the thing that I often think about is supports in a general nature and what people need, not even based on what is there. I guess the reason I got asked to come is I have training to teach person-centered thinking through the learning community for person-centered practices, as well as I do path plans. So besides being a behavior consultant, I'm able to I do person-centered planning for teams on a short-term basis. This is weird just seeing my name and nothing else, so I apologize. So for me, I've been working with a lot of teenagers and young 20-something-year-olds because I still get to work. The youngest person I work with currently is 4. The oldest person I work with right now is 35. So I've gotten to work across that. The things that are coming up that I really think I want to share is helping parents learn to transition from that parent role to that adult role, either as a parent of an adult child or being a guardian, because just because you're a guardian does not mean you get to make all the decisions for the person, so taking through and talking through the things like where people talk about like dignity of risk and things like that. So when we're starting to talk about, like, I try to talk to families a lot about balancing what somebody needs to be safe and healthy versus what some of us want to do. So we talk about, and I think service systems often are very focused on keeping people healthy and safe, that we forget that all of us learn based on some of our own failures, and we can provide a net for people to fail safely when they're still at home with their parents. So like an example of that is, I loved that Erin talked about planning with, because I once worked with an adult in Milwaukee where his team had decided that he needed to learn how to make a sandwich. So he had been working on learning to make a sandwich for a year and was making no progress. One night his mom's on the phone and he wanted salmon, so he cooked himself a salmon in the oven correctly. And because he wanted to cook salmon, he could care less about the sandwich, right? So that's an important example of like planning with. We have a lot of goals for the children and the people we support, but sometimes if it doesn't match theirs, they're just not going to participate. I think the other part is having people have the right to fail or to make mistakes. So I'm currently working with a family where I was brought on as a behavior consultant because of lack of school attendance. And so every morning, he's 17, every morning his mom would try to wake him up and start earlier and earlier, and he wouldn't get out of bed to go to school, and she was like losing sleep over all of this. And I asked if there were any other ways for him to wake up, and she had never provided him the opportunity to use an alarm or take responsibility for his own waking up. So he's now taking a college course, because it seems in Dane County it's really good, like your senior year in high school, you can start taking classes at MATC. And he was really drawn to that class, and we let him know ahead of time, like, if you want to go to college, if you want to move out, you need to get yourself up to go to school or to work. And so his mother, with a lot of trepidation, agreed not to wake him up when he didn't wake when he was supposed to. She made sure he had an alarm set. everything like that. She had to leave the house because she was so anxious because she had done this for how many years, right? He didn't wake up on time and she felt really bad. The next day, he had 3 alarms set by his head and made class and has not missed that class since. So I think so when we're often talking about his plans in future, she's like, well, I don't want him to fail. And I'm like, we have to feel kind of the pain of what is happening or what our decisions are influencing in order to make the changes or in order for it to be important to us. I think the other piece, as people were talking, was about when we're looking at individuals and what they are, we're also looking at everybody has a role to play. And so often when we're thinking about services or people with disabilities, we think about where can we go where they can support their needs versus putting on the hat of what are their gifts and what are things they're really good at and what environments could benefit from their presence. And I think that often comes up when I'm doing person-centered planning with high schoolers, because everybody's like, well, what service is going to be there to provide that versus thinking about, oh my gosh, like, you know, like let's take a step back and then people will follow through and they're like, oh yeah, like my neighbor's neighbor, whatever. So like recently I did a person-centered plan and the child is 14 and wants to be a veterinarian. She has an IEP and parents are pretty, like one parent's like, she can't go to college with an IEP. Being a veterinarian is too high of a goal. The other parent has a different opinion because he's not sure she can pay for vet school, right? So we have all this stuff going on. And I'm like, she's 14. If she wants to know about animals and to work with animals, most 14-year-olds, the only thing you've seen is being a vet. And so like during that planning process, I've been able to connect the family with a friend of mine who actually works at Henry Vilas Zoo with the birds. And so now the two of them are going to meet up and she's going to learn about different animals. So like it was taking the focus from, okay, she wants to be a vet. How do we get her to be a vet? To she's interested in animals. Let's explore all these paths and figure out what needs to go forward. I think sometimes when we're talking about disabilities, we get so focused on creating a concrete plan that we forget that none of our lives go that way. Like I like to say, I didn't know what I wanted to be till I grew up until I was 30. I have a bachelor's degree in music and 2 masters in music. Ask me what I do with them. Right? You know, and at some point in time, it's just more about having the experience, learning from that experience and moving forward. I think the other part is when we're talking about community involvement, I think it's important to remember that different types of community supports will have different types of support. So just like us, we have different levels of support within different places we go. So when places talk about, or families or teams start talking about independence and wanting to make sure that people can budget or can meal plan or things along those lines, I try to always help us remember that none of us are completely independent. We all rely on others for other things. So for example, in my house, I don't grocery shop. I don't do laundry. I don't clean the bathroom. That support is provided to me by my husband. Is it a different level of support? Yes. But I think thinking about it in those ways, as well as thinking through, I have different connections at different levels in different places. So like if I'm part of a crochet group, that's one type of connection versus if I'm part of a mom's group where we know each other and we like to complain about our kids. And I think it's the same for individuals we support. And part of it is just showing up in that place and allowing people to participate in that atmosphere. So another example of this is my mentor's son, and his mom went to Starbucks every Saturday morning to get coffee together. They went every Saturday. The barista knew their name. Everybody knew their name in that there. One morning he says, Mom, I'm going on my own. He had his driver's license, got in the car and drove to Starbucks. He got to Starbucks, and before Mom could even get in to follow him, like, why is he going by himself? A friend from Starbucks called and said, hey, your son's here. Normally you're here together. How are things going? Right? And it's that different level of kind of like that dependence. Like, are they going to be able to provide the support he needs because of his disability? No, but they're there and they notice that something is different. It turns out that he wanted to meet girls and knew that his mom was not going to help him meet girls. So he left his mom at home. And so I think as I'm helping families plan and think these things through, like also making sure that we're not holding the individuals that we're supporting to a higher standard than we're holding other neurotypical youth. So like I currently work with a 20-year-old whose parents want him to clean the bathroom every week and make sure to get all the corners nice and clean and pick things up and move it around. And they would also like him to meal plan. And I'm like, let's move back to when you were 20. Like, I swear my husband lived off of pizza for a whole entire year. Right? So like thinking about and making sure that we're realizing that developmentally, we can't, nobody's frontal lobe is developed until they're 25. People are going to make bad mistakes about money. People are going to make bad mistakes about that. It's more about building the net of the community around them to kind of help support or to keep things going in the right direction. I didn't talk 15 minutes, but that's all I got, Eric.
That's all great, Andrea. Thank you for sharing those stories. I just want to make a brief comment on Andrea and then again open it up. We have 20 minutes, so I want to give Hannah at least 15. So we might just kind of go on to close. But I think, Andrea, one of the things I appreciated about your presentation was, and I was thinking about as you're talking, like, we're families. We're very vulnerable because as a family unit, we know what we know. And so it's hard to maybe step out and think about it differently. And I think your role as a consultant and how you bring that in is just really important. But I also have to think like, what's the negotiation of that at times? Like, how do you sort of think about that when you have those competing interests in your role, either through person-centered planning or helping people through past, but also as a consultant? Like, you know, we know it builds trust. We know you have to build rapport and all of those things, but I'm more curious, like in the heat of the moment, like what have you learned about how to sort of negotiate or maybe to have people take a step back and maybe put it in perspective?
I think parts of it is I always try to validate the other person's experiences. I have a 15-year-old who at the age of 3 was crying and said that they couldn't stop the drama, and that has continued through teenage years. So sometimes I just sharing that space of raising a teenager or being a parent can be really rough. And along those lines, as well as taking through and having a conversation. So I would say a lot of my work right now is more with the parents or the adult caregivers, because talking to them about we can't make other people do things that they don't want to do. And just because something is healthy for us or safe for us, we shouldn't. I will often tell this story, like, every year I go see my doctor. Every year, you need to really work on losing that weight, Andrea. I've lost weight three times in my life. all 3 times related to having a kid. I only did it when it linked to something that was important to me as well as for me. And so then helping parents think about that as well with their kids. Like, the kid who never, his mom woke him up every morning, she's really frustrated because he doesn't go to art class. Well, he doesn't need art class to graduate. He doesn't like art. School just needed to assign him a spot. You know, so like helping them understand, does he need to go to art class? Yes, as parents, they need to send him to school. But also, we need to find something within that that is important to him in order for him to have any buy-in.
Thank you for that. It kind of resonates, but my previous supervisor had a phrase that says sometimes it sucks being an adult. And we often use that when we were confronted with like an adult moment, like, yeah, okay, we're gonna have to rise above, you know, we're gonna have to be an adult about this. And sometimes that takes acknowledging your own shortcomings or how you kind of feel about things and being able to step outside yourself and see that. So I was just thinking of that statement. Oh, I'll let Tracy chime in and then we'll get ready to pass it over to Hannah. Go ahead, Tracy.
Well, I think on the same token, you know, sometimes it does suck to be an adult, but sometimes you got to ask why too. Like, why is that important? Why could I let it go? Or is this something that we need to do? So, and I think, you know, as a society, we need to start giving up sometimes on things that may or may not be important, but really focus on the things that are.
Well said. Thank you.
I completely agree with that statement. Dr. Peter Gerhardt actually talks about this. He's an ABA consultant. There are things that society will bend for autistic people and things that society will not. And we make the mistake of not acknowledging that and prioritizing too much in what we want from autistic people versus what society will not bend and they have to adjust to.
Thank you, James. All right, we've got just 15 minutes left for Hannah. Thank you, Hannah, for hanging on. Like I said, we didn't do a dry run, so we kind of thought we would, you know, fit all it in, but here we are, like coming up on time. Hannah, just like all the other guests, before you start your presentation, can you share with people a little bit about your background and history and what you bring to this topic of adult transition?
I sure can. Just want to make sure you guys can all hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay, great. Perfect. I have been sitting and listening for a while, so I'm wanting to make sure my voice holds up because I've been sitting quietly. First of all, I really appreciate all of the things that everyone has brought today. Thank you so much for sharing. I think this is a ton of really valuable information, and I hope I can add just a piece to what has already been a really informative presentation. So a little bit about who I am. My name is Hannah Johnson. I work for an organization called Place of Mind. Maybe I'll start with who I am as a person before I go into who I am as a professional. So as a person, I'm an ADHDer and I'm a sibling to an autistic individual. My training is in clinical social work with a focus specifically around mental health. And my background is kind of in the autism support world, which used to look a lot like autism treatment and behavioral interventions. And I've also done some trauma treatment in the past. Currently, my work at Place of Mind is focusing around community-based inclusive assessment work and supportive psychological services for neurodivergent folks, which are kind of big fancy words for joining with people to figure out sort of who they are, what they want and what they need, and helping create or identify supports and accommodations that will be helpful for people living sort of their most authentic, full lives. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I will try to, and thank you all for bearing with me too at the tail end of this here. I appreciate all of the brain power, and I will try to sort of get through this as efficiently as I can. And thanks, Tim, for helping out in the chat as well. So at Place of Mind, we do some direct clinical work with individuals, but last year, we also ran a neurodivergent emerging adults group that was funded through an American Rescue Plan Act grant. And I am excited to see some familiar faces on here who we collaborated with in that in that process. And I'm going to share a little bit today about some things that we learned from that group experience, what we learned from the neurodivergent emerging adults themselves. And then I'll also share a little bit about some things that I've learned through the neurodivergent emerging adults in my sort of one-to-one clinical work. All right, ready for the next slide. So we called our group Self-Advocacy in Everyday Life. We really wanted this group to feel like intentional and different from other sort of therapeutic or identity development type groups that might have been done in the past. We really focused on co-creating the group and the contents and the structure with those that are participating and with those that are going to be most impacted by the systems that we're sort of talking about. So we talked about some trickier topics. We talked about barriers that we face as neurodivergent individuals navigating a world not designed for us. We talked about ableism. We really started to think about what makes brains and bodies happy and healthy. And also really thinking about what are some things that we want in our lives that are separate from what others have maybe tried to tell us we want or tried to encourage us to do. So really trying to promote more of that autonomy and looking at sort of day-to-day life hacks, right? Day-to-day supports and accommodations that we can all get familiar with and try to practice as we work towards living our sort of most autonomous and full life. Next slide, thanks. Another thing that was cool about this group is that we somewhat simultaneously ran a group for caregivers of neurodivergent emerging adults. So some of the caregivers that were in that group had young adults who were in the NEA group or neurodivergent emerging adults group that we ran. So we also tried to inform the caregivers group structure based on what we learned from the young adults themselves. We also know that supporting just young adults without also supporting their supporters, right? Their parents, their caretakers, their teachers, all of the above. It's only really addressing one part of a larger puzzle. Support needs to happen sort of on all levels in order for meaningful change to occur. So some of the topics that we covered in our neurodivergent emerging adults group and simultaneously with the caregivers group is we talked about things that all of our brains need. So universal human needs, which looks like sensory stuff, human home and community, what that means, what that looks like. We looked at connections in nourishment and thinking about healthy food, but also thinking about preferred versus non-preferred foods, having enough spoons or energy throughout each day to do the things we want and need to do. We also talked about what makes our brains unique, what makes them different. So thinking about we all have different bodies. We all have different perspectives and life experiences or experiences with trauma that have informed sort of how we navigate the world. So in a lot of ways, our brains are all universal and similar, and in a lot of ways, our brains are unique and have their own needs. And then we tried to sort of put it all in context. So what this means in everyday life, how does this show up for the neurodivergent emerging adults day to day? What barriers have they faced when trying to understand what makes their brain unique or what makes their brain the same? So these are just a few examples of topics that we delved deeper into each week. These are questions that we explored with group participants. Again, in an effort to be really intentional about this group being structured and co-created with those that are participating in it. So it's not us as the experts coming in and saying, here's a group where we'll be teaching you about this and where, you will be doing this. It's more thinking about how can we create a space that works for everyone, where we learn about what's interesting to you, sort of like what Andrea was just talking about and what many have talked about today. having the group be relevant and interesting to those that are participating in it. That will lead to the most meaningful learning. These are templates that we have also created with Place of Mind and have shared beyond just that group setting, and we'd be happy to share with anyone else. I think it can be really helpful as you're getting to know new people that you're supporting or that are supporting you, maybe. These are helpful guiding questions that go beyond just sort of what are your concerns and what are you what behaviors have come up for you that you'd like support with. They really look at more than just that. So this is our sort of our group agreement. In a traditional sort of therapeutic group, you'd have like a group rules and a group contract, if you will. This was our attempt to do something a little bit more accessible and affirmative to that. So we kind of did a survey of the group and thought about what everyone's preferences will be as we participate together. We agreed that some of those agreements would be moving our bodies whenever we need to, taking breaks anytime, always being allowed to pass or communicate in our own ways, knowing that friendships can grow inside and outside of the group, just depending on what participants want, and respecting each other's privacy. And then a few extra thoughts around eye contact really being person by person, not a mandatory thing by any means. Cameras on, cameras off. This group was both in person and virtual, so it was a hybrid thing. We had a few main locations in Janesville and La Crosse of participants in person, and we also had some folks who joined virtually, and we facilitated virtually as well. Yeah, next slide. So a little bit deeper into some of the topics we covered. This is when I talk about home and community. We thought about what are things that you need in a home? What do you want your days to look like? Do you want to live with other people? Would you rather live in the city or in the country? Starting to think about creating sort of a life for yourself that aligns with who you are and what you want. And this on this level, specifically thinking about what do you want in a home and where might you want that home to be. Ready for the next. We also talked a lot about masking. So making the shift from masking to self-advocacy, defining how masking can look like changing or hiding who you are to try to fit in, doing what others might want you to do, even if it doesn't quite feel right, dismissing or ignoring your own wants and needs, and instead trying to make the shift to self-advocacy, which is really what this group was about, learning about yourself, understanding your own wants and needs, trying new things and setting boundaries and being the most authentic version of you. Ready for the next one. I apologize, I'm going fast. I'm trying to make sure I fit it all in. Some other things that we did that made this group unique, and we got feedback from participants that they really liked this, were check-ins. So instead of just asking, how are you feeling? What color aligns with your mood today? We used a lot of these sort of, what are you today? Or on a scale of these rubber ducks, how are things going today? So people could respond just by saying, you know what, I'm actually feeling like the number 6 deflated duck on this slide, like that. I don't really have any other words right now for it, but that's where I'm at. So this was kind of a cool, unique way to get a sense for how people were kind of coming to the group that day. And it also was always a little bit of a humor break as well. We really wanted this group to feel like a comfortable, safe, and chill space for people. Also, people don't always have the words or know how they're feeling each day. So we also used a lot of memes in the group, which we got feedback was really appreciated. These are things that, or images paired with words that normalize and articulate some of these really typical experiences that many neurodivergent people face or experience. And group members really liked these as well. So it may be like looking at the penguin one, for example, when someone might say, tell me something unique about yourself, the response is panic. Oh no. So normalizing that as a human thing. also how my brain works, that light switch on there, utterly uninterested or completely obsessed. There's no in between. Those are the options. So these were also kind of an effective, both like teaching strategy, but also discussion initiators, where people could say, yes, I align with this one, or I don't know, this doesn't make any sense to me at all. We've started to collect a meme resource bank. That's been one of my projects that I think has been really fun, and I've used quite a bit in our consultation work. So some of the key learning from that group, participants reported things that were really impactful to learn about were masking. We did a whole week around special interests where folks could just info dump about things that they loved and talents that they have. We talked a lot about life hacks. So everything from set timers for yourself when you lose track of time to if you're getting a phone call that you don't know how long you want it to last, you can start by saying, oh, my battery's about to die, so I don't know how long I'll have. That's just sort of, random examples of life hacks, if you will. And also things that are not just for neurodivergent folks, but for every human being. Discussion around our similar yet unique brains, sort of holding that both and, as it's been mentioned already here today. And thinking about energy regulation and spoons was something that participants reported as being helpful. We took some data that I don't have a visual for here from participants, but after the group, our participants reported feeling an increased sense of purpose, an increased desire to contribute, increased feelings of competency in their own life, increased feelings of freedom, and a desire for more freedom in their life. Increased desire to make their own choices, an increased desire for more autonomy and more feelings of autonomy following the group, and more or increased feelings of having a valued social role. So those are all domains that we really were trying to support through this group process. And kind of thinking about that similar yet unique brains, I think this is a really helpful visual that the group resonated with. Finding that balance as a neurodivergent person, admitting you have challenges and finding ways to support what you need while also cultivating a positive self-identity and knowing you're not broken. We really tried to sort of help people find this balance. So this was one that resonated. And then in my last minute or two, some of the learning that I have experienced through one-on-one support with neurodivergent emerging adults. I'm going to share a little bit about my client Ryan with his permission. You can go to the next slide. So he wanted to be here today, but had a conflicting appointment. So he wanted me to share some of these messages about his transition into adulthood, which he experienced recently. He discussed how there are lots of changes that felt like they were happening all at once. It was really hard for him to meet a whole new team of supporters and learn how to trust new people. And he expressed that finding the right support has been the hardest part, and finding the right home with the right supporters has been especially hard as well. So in an effort to support him throughout all of that, ready for the next one, something that we worked on together has been co-creating, again, this theme of like not just doing something for a person and not just expecting them to do it themselves, but finding ways to join with a person and create something together that's reflective of their goals, their vision, their process, their needs. So Ryan and I worked together to create this visual that we provided for some of his supporters at school as he was sort of amid his transition into the adult service world, really just breaking down what are the things that feel stressful when they happen and what are the things that feel helpful. This is something that was a lot more digestible for many of his supporters at school to read and to understand, as opposed to looking through a long, sort of thorough written document that, can often I don't know who has the time to read all of those when it comes to like behavioral support or, just generally support and accommodation plans, I think can often get very wordy and very lengthy. So this is something that came from Ryan that I sort of just transferred into a document or into a visual that we could share. And then this worked really well. So as Ryan moved into a new home, ready for the next slide, we made another version of this for his new home and his new supporters in his new home. Something that he needs a lot of help with is cleaning. And in the past, he's been really easily sort of triggered and activated when people ask him to do things by himself or try to do things for him. So we really tried to articulate both, again, what feels stressful, what feels helpful, and then some environmental supports that can help set him and others up for success. So I apologize, that was really rushed. I'm sorry. I was trying to be mindful of the time and happy to answer any questions if they're coming up for folks. And I appreciate everyone's listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Hannah. I should apologize to you for kind of not managing the time very well. But yes, anybody who's still on, please feel free to ask Hannah a question either in the chat or if you want to come off mute. Hannah, to me, two things that jumped out. Three things. First of all, the memes and the colorfulness of the documents you have. I love that, and it just feels so contemporary to me. It feels like fresh, and it's really kind of the same messages, but I just love how you all have kind of made those documents look and the presentation of them. The idea of co-creating safe space, when you talked about that, I heard James's story, I heard Aaron's story, and then what I heard from you was just sort of how you're we're going to call it safe space. Sometimes that happens naturally for other people and sometimes maybe not, but we're going to identify this as safe space so that people can start to learn and feel like they can share aspects of themselves. And then the masking thing, I just want to put that out there. I think that's a huge issue and one that I think we're all starting to learn more about as a society. And so thanks for raising that and making that a part of your neurodivergent group. And I'll shut up and I'll let Aaron talk. Go ahead, Aaron.
Okay, so this is awesome. I've been thinking in memes since the 90s and doing sort of that iPad mentality. So this has been a long time coming and it's finally here. Thank God. I'll be taking some of this home to improve my life now rather than regret. It's like, I'm sorry I missed that. It's like, oh man, it's like well, no, you can create a beautiful life for yourself no matter how old you get. It's not too late.
Words of wisdom, Aaron. Not too late. Too, if you can see them. I see one person asked if there are groups for older people in their 30s that Place of Mind also works with. And then another person about how can we join your group? Or another question about how we can join your group.
I really appreciate the questions and the interest. We don't have any groups for neurodivergent individuals right now, but we are always hoping to get momentum to get those going. So the best thing that you can do is fill out sort of an interest form on our website. And that way we will also have your contact info so that when we do have groups going, yes, we also do virtual services, and groups are often hybrid, so they could be either in person or virtual. Same with the one-to-one work. But to fill out our website's interest form, and that way we can keep you posted as we have groups getting up and running, and we know kind of what kind of groups people are really interested in. I'm seeing some for people in their 30s or sort of past that emerging adult age and more into that adulthood age. We're hoping to get a Madison-based neurodivergent emerging adults group going at some point soon. thanks, Tim, for sharing the link to the website there. And any specific questions or wonderings, you feel free to just email us and reach out. We're pretty responsive with that.
Thank you, Hannah. Just looking at the time, thanks for everybody for holding on. I'll just ask if our presenters can hold on for just a couple minutes, if there's maybe one last question or so. If not, I won't keep people waiting. And I'm sure James is ready to move out of his little room there and join the conference too. So any last questions or comments from anybody? Tim says they'll be sending out an evaluation, and there will be an opportunity to request a certificate of attendance, and that we'll be working on getting everything posted as well. So you are welcome, everybody.
Have a good day, everybody. Yeah, no, I was able to make this work, and after this is done, I'll go back to the conference.
Thank you so much, James, for your West Coast appearance. And thank you to all of our panelists and our presenters. I think this was a great day of sharing. I hope lessons learned can be used for other families and other folks. So have a good day, everybody. We'll let you go.